The first sound was gravel. Not the crunch of tires you'd expect from a neighbor driving home, but the thunderous scrape of machines grinding across stone like a giant's teeth chewing rocks. I shot upright in bed, pulse hammering, the windows rattling in their frames. Somewhere out beyond the cedar trees, headlights flickered and shadows moved against the pre-dawn sky. This wasn't traffic. This was an invasion. I threw on boots and a shirt, stepped out into the cool Texas morning, and was hit by the sour stench of asphalt. The air shimmered with diesel fumes and floodlights, painting the landscape in a pale, surgical glow. Men in reflective vests swarmed across my driveway. The same winding gravel road I had bought, maintained, and protected for 3 years, scraping, flattening, and pouring tar like it already belonged to them. And there, standing at the edge of the chaos in heels that sank into the gravel like spears, was a figure who would upend my life. Vivian Ashworth. Arms folded, clipboard tucked against her chest like a royal decree. She surveyed the scene with a smile that could cut glass. She didn't wave. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need to, not in her mind. The road that had cost me $80,000, the road deliberately carved out of HOA, reached decades ago by the old rancher who sold me this land, was being stolen in front of my eyes. 3 years earlier, I thought I'd left battles like this behind. My name is Garrett Rockwell. I'd spent 30 years building concrete cities in Dallas, only to wake up one day and realize I'd traded peace for profit. So I sold everything, took my wife Elena and our daughter Sophia, and bought 3 acres on the fringe of the Texas Hill Country. The house sat tucked among oaks and mesquites, 100 yards from the nearest neighbor, with a view of rolling fields that looked painted by God himself. For us, the road wasn't just gravel and stone. It was the line between serenity and chaos, the promise that we weren't under anyone's thumb. I remember the first evening we moved in. Sophia, 15 and still rolling her eyes at everything, lay back in a lawn chair with headphones while Elena planted jasmine along the porch rail. I grilled steaks, and the only sound was mockingbirds singing over the crunch of gravel under our tires. That was freedom. That was why we'd come. And then came Vivian. If ambition had a perfume, it would reek exactly like hers. Sharp, expensive, and impossible to ignore. She was the kind of woman who treated rules not as boundaries, but as weapons. Perfectly manicured nails pointing like bayonets, each motion calculated to remind you she was in charge. President of the Willowbrook Commons HOA, realtor by trade, self-declared guardian of community standards. The first time I saw her, she wasn't walking. She was marching. Clipboard in one hand, measuring stick in the other, inspecting lawns like a general on parade. Neighbors half laughed, half winced as she stopped to jot notes. No mailbox was too square, no hedge too high, no bird feeder too colorful for her scrutiny. But I didn't care. She didn't own me, didn't own my land, and sure as hell didn't own my road. Or so I thought. That night, when the machines finished their last pass, the gravel that once sang under my truck tires was gone, smothered under black asphalt. Floodlights clicked off one by one until only silence remained. The workers packed up, their boots crunching across ground that no longer felt like mine. At dawn, I found my fence posts ripped out, my survey markers bent and discarded like trash. And taped to my front gate, flapping in the cool breeze, was a letter. Official Willowbrook Commons HOA assessment notice. It wasn't addressed to Dear Neighbor. It was addressed to me. They had paved over my road, declared it a community improvement project, and billed me $3,200, with monthly maintenance fees tacked on like interest from a loan shark. At the bottom, in bold type, a single sentence that told me everything I needed to know about the war ahead. Welcome to Willowbrook Standards, Mr. Rockwell. Compliance is not optional. I folded the letter, slid it into my back pocket, and stood there staring at the fresh tar steaming in the morning sun. For 30 years, I had built cities out of concrete. I knew the smell of a fight when I breathed it. This wasn't a letter. It was a declaration of war. The smell of asphalt clung to everything that morning. My clothes, the cedar trees, even Elena's jasmine. No matter how many times I washed my hands, the stink lingered, like a warning I couldn't scrub away. Elena noticed it first. She set her coffee down harder than usual, the porcelain rattling on the table. "Garrett, tell me I'm imagining this," she said, pointing toward the road. I followed her gaze through the kitchen window. Our quiet gravel lane now gleamed black, slick and foreign. And at its entrance, 2 stone pillars had appeared overnight, brass plaques catching the morning sun. Willowbrook Commons Grand Entrance. EST 2023. I felt heat rise in my chest. That sign wasn't just metal and stone. It was theft dressed up as progress. Sophia shuffled into the kitchen, earbuds still in, yawning. She froze when she saw the pillars. "Wait," she said, frowning. "Didn't you always say the road was private?" I nodded slowly. "Then how?" She stopped, eyes widening. They just did." I cut in. By noon, the neighborhood was buzzing. Pickup trucks rolled up. Neighbors leaned against tailgates, murmuring and pointing. Some looked guilty, others curious, but no one crossed the property line. Word traveled faster than wildfire in Texas, and Vivian had lit the match. When I confronted her that afternoon, she was exactly where I expected. In a strip mall office that doubled as HOA headquarters, perched behind a desk littered with plaques and real estate awards. She didn't look up when I walked in, only gestured at the chair across from her, like she was granting me audience. "Garrett," she said smoothly, finally lifting her gaze. Her smile was polished steel. "I trust you've seen the improvements." "Improvements?" My voice cracked with disbelief. "You destroyed my property. That road doesn't belong to Willowbrook. It belongs to me." She slid a laminated map across the desk. My driveway was highlighted in yellow marker, labeled Future Community Thoroughfare. "The previous owner always intended to integrate your access road," she explained, drawing out the word rustic like it was a disease. "We're simply modernizing for safety. School buses, emergency vehicles. You wouldn't want to be the reason a child got hurt, would you?" It took everything I had not to laugh in her face. "Show me the deed," I demanded. Her smile thinned. Verbal agreements were made. "Verbal doesn't beat legal." "Legal," she said, leaning forward, her perfume sharp as chlorine, "is flexible. Community standards are not." That was the first moment I realized Vivian wasn't just arrogant. She was dangerous. The harassment began immediately. That week, a letter arrived, assessment notice, $3,200 road improvement fee. Monthly maintenance $285. Non-payment subject to lien and legal action. 2 days later, I came home to find a security guard parked at the end of my own driveway. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses glinting, he waved me down like I was trespassing. "Sir, I'll need to verify your authorization to access this road," he said. I stared at him. "Authorization? That's my house right there." "Community protocol," he shrugged. "Everyone's required." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I drove past, gravel dust spraying his shiny golf cart. My knuckles stayed white on the wheel until I pulled into the garage. Elena's patience wore thinner each day. She slammed cabinets harder, muttered while folding laundry. One night, she dropped into a chair at the kitchen table and buried her face in her hands. "They cornered me," she whispered. "Who?" "Janet Morrison and 2 others at the store, asking if we were in financial trouble, if you were dragging down property values. Like I'm supposed to answer for your decisions." I reached for her hands, but she pulled back, trembling. Elena was steady as bedrock, the woman who had held entire schools together in crisis. Seeing her shaken was worse than any letter Vivian could send. Upstairs, Sophia began closing her curtains during the day. "Feels like living in a fishbowl," she muttered. Each time she left the house, groups of neighbors strolled by with phones out, snapping pictures, whispering behind their hands. Vivian called them community beautification walks. I call them reconnaissance patrols. But anger has a way of sharpening focus. I called an old friend, Dustin Chavez, now a traffic engineer. Within a week, he surveyed the road with GPS equipment, planting neon markers that screamed ownership. And then I made a second call to Rex Donovan, a retired sheriff's deputy with a nose for buried secrets. If Vivian thought intimidation would wear me down, she didn't know who she was dealing with. As I stood at the edge of my newly blackened road that night, neon markers glowing like fireflies against the asphalt, I felt the weight of something shift inside me. Vivian had made her move. Now it was my turn. The envelope was thick. Too thick to be good news. It arrived by certified mail on a Friday afternoon, stamped with the name of a Dallas law firm I knew all too well, Peton and Associates, the same group that had handled the sale of my construction company years earlier. Back then, they were my allies. Now, the logo looked like a knife slipped between my ribs. Inside, the letter accused me of destruction of community property, specifically my freshly placed survey stakes. They threatened a $50,000 lawsuit plus attorney fees if I didn't remove them immediately. I read it twice, then a third time. By the fourth, the words blurred into static. Elena found me sitting in the garage, papers spread across the workbench like battle maps. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Her expression caught somewhere between worry and exasperation. "You look like a general planning a campaign," she said softly. I lifted the letter. That's exactly what this is. That night, I stared at the ceiling while Elena slept beside me. Every creak of the house felt amplified, every thought heavier. What if I dragged my family into something they couldn't handle? Sophia was already pulling back, her laughter quieter, her eyes shadowed. Elena, usually unflappable, had begun to tremble at the mention of neighbors' names. Was protecting a road, my road, worth it? I rolled onto my side, the smell of asphalt still lingering in the sheets, and admitted something I hadn't before. This wasn't about gravel or tar anymore. It was about control. Vivian wasn't just stealing land. She was trying to erase who we were as a family. If I backed down, I'd teach Sophia that bullies win. That lesson was unacceptable. Sleep never came, but clarity did. The next morning, Rex called. His voice carried that gravelly excitement only lawmen get when they've cornered a snake. "You were right," he said. "She's not just pushing boundaries. She's running a scheme." He laid it out piece by piece. Shell companies buying up properties around mine. Loans stacked against projected HOA fees. Quiet deals with her brother-in-law, a county commissioner who'd approve permits that didn't exist on paper. "She's not fighting you for aesthetics," Rex concluded. "She's fighting for survival. If you don't sell, her whole empire collapses." The words hit me harder than any lawsuit could. Suddenly, her obsession made sense. The surveillance walks, the smear campaigns, the guard at my driveway. This wasn't about one road. I was the keystone in her house of cards. And if I held my ground, the whole thing would fall. That weekend, proof of Vivian's desperation arrived in person. Elena was loading groceries into the trunk when Vivian appeared in the school parking lot. Pink blazer, pearls, that polished smile, an image she'd perfected. "Elena, honey," she began, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I know this has been hard on your family. Garrett can be stubborn." She glanced around, then leaned closer. "What if I told you I could make it all go away? $25,000. Cash. For your inconvenience." Elena froze, one hand still on the grocery bag. "Where would that money come from?" she asked. "The Community Improvement Fund," Vivian replied without hesitation, as if the phrase embezzlement didn't exist in her vocabulary. What she didn't know was that Elena, cool as stone under pressure, had already pressed record on her phone. Every word, every fake smile, every dollar of that bribe was captured in digital clarity. When Elena played me the recording that night, her hands shook only slightly. "She thinks she can buy us," Elena said, her voice firm. "Over my dead body." I felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly knocked me over. She wasn't just my wife, she was my ally. And now we had Vivian's voice confessing to theft on tape. But the true twist came 3 days later, when the sabotage turned personal. I returned from town to find our irrigation system destroyed, water pooling in the yard. Someone had cut the main line clean through, precise, intentional. My roses wilted in the heat, grass browned by the hour. As I crouched to examine the damage, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from an unknown number. "Mr. Rockwell," the voice purred. It was Vivian. "I understand you're planning to repair community infrastructure. That'll require board approval and a $5,000 deposit." The laugh that escaped my throat was hollow, dangerous. She had sabotaged my land, then tried to extort me for fixing it. That was the moment something in me shifted permanently. I wasn't just defending my property anymore. I was dismantling an empire. That night, I converted the garage into a war room. Maps of the subdivision spread across the walls, neon markers stabbing like warning flares. Rex's files stacked in color-coded boxes. Surveillance footage queued on Marcus Webb's spare laptop. My ex-Marine neighbor who'd quietly offered his skills to the cause. When Elena walked in with coffee, she surveyed the setup and smirked. "This looks like either a crime drama set," she said, "or the most interesting garage sale in Texas." "Neither," I replied, tightening a string line across a map. "This is where we take our lives back." And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel outnumbered. I felt ready. The first sign of escalation wasn't fire or broken glass. It was silence. For weeks, the street had buzzed with Vivian's so-called beautification walks. Neighbors snapping photos, whispering like spies. But one Tuesday morning, the sidewalk in front of our house was empty. No cameras. No pointy stairs. Just the eerie quiet of people holding their breath before something breaks. Elena noticed it too. "Feels wrong," she said, setting down her coffee. Her eyes were tired, ringed with sleeplessness. Like they're planning something. She was right. That afternoon, Marcus dropped by. He looked the way only retired Marines can look, calm, watchful, carrying the weight of things most people couldn't imagine. He set a flash drive on the table between us. "Trail cams picked this up last night," he said. I plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage of 3 men in hoodies pulling survey stakes out of the ground at 2:13 a.m. One of them was Vivian herself, pink tracksuit gleaming under the floodlights, barking orders like a drill sergeant gone rogue. My jaw tightened. She's bold enough to do it herself now. Marcus nodded. Bold or desperate? Desperation's dangerous. The harassment turned surgical. The county tax office reevaluated my property based on the road improvements. Our annual bill nearly doubled. An anonymous complaint triggered a visit from Child Protective Services, forcing Sophia to endure a humiliating inspection of her bedroom. Even her college application stalled when the system flagged our address as unverified. One night, she slammed her laptop shut, tears brimming in her eyes. "Why is she doing this to us? I didn't do anything." I knelt beside her. "It's not you, sweetheart." She's scared. And when bullies get scared, they lash out. Sophia shook her head. "Then make it stop. Please." Her voice cracked on that last word. It hit me harder than any lawsuit or sabotage. I went to bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the weight of my daughter's plea pressing down on me like stone. Rex delivered the second blow 2 days later. He spread files across the war room table, his weathered hands tapping on photos of deeds and loan agreements. "She's underwater," he said. "Her shell companies owe $300,000 to the bank. She's been propping it up with HOA dues and bogus improvement fees." I leaned over the documents, scanning lines of legal jargon. "So, if she loses this road, she loses everything," Rex finished. The realization twisted my gut. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was survival for Vivian. She wouldn't stop at intimidation. And she didn't. Friday morning, Elena walked out of school to find a note tucked under her windshield wiper. For words scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Stop him. Or else." She handed it to me that evening, her hand steady but her eyes raw. "She's coming after me now. After my job. My safety." I folded the note carefully and slid it into a file. But inside, something cracked. For years, Elena had been the calm center of our family, the one who steadied me when my temper ran hot. Seeing fear etched in her face was unbearable. I sat in the garage that night, staring at maps pinned to the wall, coffee gone cold in my hand. For the first time, doubt crept in. Maybe we should cut our losses, sell the land, start fresh. Was pride worth my wife's safety? My daughter's future? The thought curdled in my stomach. If we walked away, Vivian would win, and not just over me. Over every neighbor too scared to fight back. Over Sophia, who'd learned the wrong lesson, that standing up to bullies only gets you crushed. I slammed my fist on the table. No, that wasn't happening. The breaking point came the following week. It was after midnight when the rumble of engines jolted me awake. I slipped on boots and hurried outside. Under glaring floodlights, unmarked trucks rolled down my freshly paved road. Workers in reflective vests unloaded speed bumps and no parking. Residents-only signs, bolting them into place. And there, in the middle of it all, was Vivian, directing traffic, her pink tracksuit glowing like a neon warning sign. The audacity left me speechless. She was building a monument to her own control on my land, betting I wouldn't dare interfere. Marcus cameras caught everything. License plates, faces, Vivian herself waving her clipboard like a conductor leading a symphony of corruption. By sunrise, the evidence was stacked against her like a tower waiting to topple. But the question gnawed at me. Was evidence enough? Elena joined me on the porch, her robe wrapped tight against the dawn chill. She placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "She's escalating," she said quietly. I nodded, eyes fixed on the blacktop scar across our land. "And so will we." That day I made 3 calls. One to Catherine Silverman, the most feared property rights attorney in Dallas. One to Sarah Sawyer, a local investigative reporter with a nose for corruption. And one to Jake Morrison. The tow truck operator Vivian owed more money than she realized. I didn't know how long the war would last. But for the first time, I wasn't just defending. I was preparing to strike. The morning of Community Action Day, dawn hot and heavy, the kind of Texas heat that pressed against your chest like a weight. From my porch, I heard them before I saw them. Engines growling, doors slamming, the metallic clatter of tools. Pickup trucks and SUVs rolled down my road like an invading convoy. Neighbors in matching T-shirts spilled out, wielding bolt cutters, sledgehammers, and rakes. Some looked nervous, others almost gleeful, caught up in Vivian's theater of righteousness. At the front, climbing out of her spotless BMW, was Vivian Ashworth herself. Clipboard in one hand, bolt cutters in the other, she looked like a general leading troops into battle. "Morning, neighbors," she called, voice carrying with practiced cheer. "Let's bring this corner of Willowbrook up to proper standards." The crowd cheered. It was surreal. Grown adults about to commit felony trespassing, applauding like they were at a tailgate party. I stepped out of the garage slowly, video camera in hand. "Morning, Vivian," I said evenly. "Planning on vandalism? Or just trespass today?" Her smile flickered, but didn't break. "Garrett, don't be dramatic. We're maintaining common property." She gestured toward my neon survey markers like they were weeds to be plucked. "These are a hazard. The first man stepped on my land, sledgehammer raised." That's when a deep voice cut through the noise. "Step back. Now." Deputy Rodriguez emerged from behind the oak line, hand resting casually on his radio. He'd been documenting Vivian's antics for weeks, waiting for the right moment. "This is private land," he announced, his tone flat, final. "You're trespassing. Put the tools down." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few lowered their hammers. But Vivian surged forward, bolt cutters raised like a weapon. "This man is destroying our community," she shrieked, pointing at me. "We have every right." The metallic snap of handcuffs silenced her. Rodriguez moved faster than anyone expected, securing her wrists before the crowd could blink. The sight of Vivian, Queen of Willowbrook, dragged backward in a pink tracksuit with cuffs biting into her skin, was almost biblical. 2 of her most loyal board members tried to intervene and ended up cuffed beside her. The crowd scattered like startled birds. But the real blow came not from the deputy's cuffs, but from the cameras. Because Vivian, in her arrogance, had invited the press. She expected to be filmed as a champion of order against a stubborn neighbor. Instead, the news crew captured her mid-rant, bolt cutters in hand, screaming about forcing compliance. Reporter Sarah Sawyer didn't waste a moment. Microphone raised, she asked, "Mrs. Ashworth, are you admitting you've instructed neighbors to damage private property?" Vivian's eyes darted, wild, the cameras reflecting her unraveling. "It's not private, it's ours." He's lying. They're all lying. It wasn't the polished realtor voice anymore. It was raw, desperate, the mask ripped away. When the footage aired that night, neighbors who'd once whispered support for Vivian went silent. Others began to talk, about fines, intimidation, lost paperwork, missing community funds. The floodgates opened. Still, Vivian wasn't finished. 2 nights later, Elena pulled into the driveway, headlights sweeping across the mailbox. It was crumpled, caved in, orange paint splashed across our siding in a crude warning. Muddy water seeped from hoses slashed open in the yard. Sophia stood on the porch, pale, holding her phone. "Dad, someone just DM'd me. They said if we don't quit, they'll make sure I don't go to college." Her voice shook. She wasn't just scared. She was broken. That was the moment I stopped wondering if this fight was worth it. I wrapped my arms around her, felt her ribs trembling, and whispered, "She's finished. I promise you." Inside, I opened Marcus' laptop. Footage queued. Vivian's midnight construction cruise, her bribery attempt, her own face directing sabotage like a crime boss. Rex's file stacked beside it. Loans, shell companies, evidence of fraud. Catherine Silverman's voice echoed in my head. Organized knowledge is a weapon of mass destruction. I wasn't just holding evidence. I was holding a warhead. The next morning, the courthouse smelled of stale coffee and sweat. Vivian had filed for an injunction to stop me from interfering with community infrastructure. She expected me to stand alone. Instead, I walked in with Marcus in uniform, Dr. Hernandez carrying medical files, Janet clutching color-coded binders, and half the neighborhood packed into the gallery. Catherine Silverman stood at the podium, her voice sharp as broken glass. She laid out everything: fraud, embezzlement, environmental crimes. When she played the recording of Vivian offering Elena $25,000 from stolen HOA funds, the room gasped. When Marcus footage rolled of midnight crews vandalizing my land, the judge leaned forward. And when Rex's documents revealed $2.4 million in fraudulent loans, Vivian's attorney dropped his pen. The judge's gavel struck like thunder. Injunction denied. Counterclaims allowed. Criminal referrals to the state. Vivian's face, as the ruling sank in, was pale as ash. For months she'd made us feel hunted, cornered, alone. Now she was the one trapped, every spotlight turned on her, the empire she built collapsing plank by plank. When we walked out into the sunlight, Elena's hand slipped into mine. For the first time in weeks, I saw relief in her eyes. Sophia smiled faintly, just enough to remind me she was still in there, still fighting. And for me, standing on those courthouse steps, one truth rang louder than the crowd, louder than the cameras. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The courtroom smelled of oak polish and nerves. Reporters lined the benches, their cameras glinting like watchful eyes. Neighbors filled every seat. People who had once whispered in fear now gathered in solidarity. At the front, Vivian sat stiff, her pearl necklace crooked, wrists folded tightly, as if she could still hold on to the image of control. But her eyes told the truth, wide, bloodshot, darting like an animal trapped in its own cage. The prosecutor's case was devastating. Months of evidence, hours of video, and a recording of her bribe played on repeat until even her own attorney winced. The story unfolded piece by piece. Fraudulent loans, embezzled dues, environmental violations, harassment campaigns. But it wasn't numbers or statutes that broke the room open. It was voices. Elena stood at the witness stand, hands steady, voice clear. She spoke of notes tucked under her windshield, whispers at the grocery store, threats against her career. She did not cry. She did not tremble. She looked Vivian in the eye and told her, "You try to make me afraid of my own neighbors. You failed." Then Sophia, my daughter, walked to the stand, 15 going on 40, the weight of the year etched in her shoulders. She described closing her curtains to escape cameras, hearing classmates call her family criminals, reading messages that threatened her future. Her voice cracked only once when she said, "I learned that standing up makes you a target, but I also learned that silence is worse." The room was silent when she finished. Even the judge paused, pen hovering, as if acknowledging that truth. When the verdict came, it landed like thunder. Guilty on multiple counts: fraud, embezzlement, environmental crimes. Prison time measured not in months, but years. Restitution ordered. Assets seized. As marshals led Vivian away, her pink suit wrinkled, her eyes still burning with defiance, I felt no triumph. Just a heavy quiet, the kind that follows a storm when the air is clean but the ground is scarred. Justice is never as sweet as you imagine. It doesn't erase the damage. It only stops the bleeding. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood shifted. The stone pillars at the end of my road were torn down, their brass plaques carted off like relics of a fallen empire. The asphalt scar was stripped, and gravel returned, crunching once more beneath tires like a sound of freedom. But the biggest change wasn't physical. It was the people. Neighbors who had once avoided mine now came forward, sharing their own stories of intimidation, their own scars. Marcus was asked to lead a community watch. Dr. Hernandez was elected HOA president, her first act of promise of transparency. Janet organized a financial review that cut dues in half. For the first time, Willowbrook felt less like a battlefield and more like a neighborhood. At home, peace returned in fragments. Elena's laugh slowly filled the house again, softer but stronger. Sophia pinned her college acceptance letter above her desk, the words full scholarship circled in red. At night, we sat on the porch listening to mockingbirds, jasmine drifting in the breeze, and I realized those sounds were what I had been fighting for all along. Still, scars remain. Sometimes, when the road lies quiet under the moonlight, I hear echoes, the metallic snap of bolt cutters, the hiss of asphalt, the murmur of neighbors turning into strangers. And I wonder how close we came to losing everything. But then I remember the sight of Vivian, once untouchable, reduced to handcuffs and silence. And I remember Sophia's words, "Silence is worse." She was right. Silence gives bullies power. Resistance takes it back. The night after the verdict, I walked the length of my gravel road alone. The stones crunched beneath my boots, steady and familiar. At the end, where the brass plaques once gleamed, the stars opened wide above me. I thought about George Blackwood, the rancher who had carved this road decades ago to keep his freedom intact. I thought about the paper he signed, the foresight he had to protect it in perpetuity. And I thought about my daughter's voice in that courtroom, carrying the lesson forward. This road wasn't just mine. It was hers now, too. When I reached the gate, I paused, the cool night air pressing against my skin. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel like a threat. It felt like peace. I ran my hand over the wood of the post, rough and steady, and whispered to the dark. They tried to take it, but still ours. The gravel answered beneath my boots as I turned back toward the house, the sound sharp, unbroken, eternal.